Yeah, I know I promised this video a long time ago, but here I'm finally ready to give my full review of Moon Knight. Just season 1 of the show. So I did my best to get a Moon Knight costume together. I look more like a Game of Thrones character, but you know what, this is what you're getting, so deal with it. Sorry. But yeah, so this will be a full spoiler review of the series / season 1. I'm excited to talk about it because it was interesting, especially compared to the other MCU shows. Because it was the first MCU show to be about a new character, not an established character or characters. So that made it unique and interesting, and I'm very excited to talk about it. So on to the negatives. There's not too many negatives, just pacing issues. It feels too rushed, like about every other MCU show. And that's not something I noticed too much, but I noticed it a little more here than every other show. Like, this show and Hawkeye might be where it's most noticeable. And I feel like it slows down where it shouldn't slow down, and speeds up where it shouldn't speed up. Very similar to Doctor Strange 2. But that's just one issue. And then also, it's too dark at a lot of times, especially in episode 4. I heard everyone talk about, like, oh, that whole section was like a horror movie. I was on the edge of my seat. I was terrified. And I was like, I could not see a thing. And maybe that was my mistake for watching it during the day. But even then, like, I couldn't see a freaking thing. I was just staring at a black screen, looking at noises and screaming and being like, huh. This is awesome, when I didn't know what was going on. So those are 2 complaints. 2 things I'm mixed about. First off is just I wasn't super interested in everything with the Egyptian gods. Like, sometimes it was really neat with Khonshu and moving the moon and the council, but just a lot of the stuff about reviving the gods and like the whole like the times that felt like Indiana Jones is when it was least interesting to me, because it was cool, but I don't know, I just felt like it could have been done better. Like, whenever those scenes were happening, the colors weren't very interesting. It just felt like generic action. There wasn't a lot of Moon Knight during those scenes. So during, like, the Indiana Jones-esque stuff, I just wasn't as into it as I was with a lot of other sections. And finally, one thing I'm mixed on is the lack of connections to other MCU projects or references to the greater MCU. Look, I think it's cool that we got a show that doesn't really reference the MCU at all, that stands on its own pretty well. But, I don't know, it just makes it feel very disconnected. And the fact that it's like, one big issue I have with the MCU right now is just the fact that, like, everything seems very disconnected. It's not like the Infinity Saga where everything was building up to Infinity War and Endgame, and that led to an amazing finale and made everything feel important. This one is like, okay, it sets up itself. And that's one thing that I've had an issue with a lot of other MCU shows, because it just sets up a season 2. And sure, I can get why they're doing that, but it kind of like lessens my interest, I suppose. But anyway, on to the positives. First off, Oscar Isaac is freaking phenomenal. In his 2 or 3 roles, he's fantastic as Steven and Mark, in that little appearance as Jake Lockley. I love how he can pull off with Mark this, you know, grizzled but like very deep at his core mercenary. And I love his connection with Steven that we get with Steven, where he's very funny, very sweet, and you love to root for him. And I think it's perfect that they introduced Steven before Mark. And just, I really enjoyed him as Moon Knight too. Even though he was in the suit, I thought he did great in action sequences. And I just loved the dual roles he played and the bond that those 2 characters shared all throughout. I thought the whole rest of the cast did really good too. I liked F. Murray Abraham as Khonshu. I thought he did great as that voice. Ethan Hawke was a phenomenal villain as Arthur Harrow. Even though he didn't have intense motivations, I also thought he had a cool backstory and he could be really scary at times. And just the scenes where he was just talking to Mark, not the ones where he was trying to be all-powerful or praying to Ammit or everything, just the scenes where he's talking to Mark. Like in episode 2 is probably my favorite performance, during that slice of life section where he's trying to convince Mark to join him. That was probably my favorite performance, where he can be scary, but you can also kind of see where he's coming from, despite the fact he's wrong. And at some points, he can seem like, oh, he's just trying to help, when you know he's up to something bad. So he does great. May Calloway as Layla is also pretty good. Of all those MCU characters where it's like, you know the kind of trope of female character. It's MCU female character who, for the most part, just kind of feels like they're here to be a love interest to the main hero. And some have evolved past that, like MJ and Pepper. Some still feel like they're kind of part of that, like Christine Palmer. I think she's like in the middle of the road example. I love her debut as Scarlet Scarab at the end, and her whole thing with her father and how that connects to Mark's past. I thought that was really cool. So I liked her in this too, and how she was always willing to stick by Mark and Steven despite everything. This show had pretty good action in the first and second episodes, and in the finale. I like the Moon Knight stuff. The Moon Knight action was really cool, especially in episode 2. Not too much to comment on there. Just some of my other favorite parts of the show. The music was amazing. I thought episode 9 was a phenomenal look into Mark and his mental health and his past and his connection with Steven. And I thought episode 5 was amazing. My favorite episode of the show by far. I just really loved everything about it. I love when the show dealt more with the multiple personality, dissociative identity disorder, and Mark and Steven and their connection. I love that way more than any of the Indiana Jones Egyptian stuff. Which is probably why those were why 1 and 5 were my favorite episodes over some of the other ones. And just the first episode was so much fun. I loved the whole scene where Jake was trying to escape the Netherlands or the Hollands, I'm sorry. But then he kept switching in and out. That was a lot of fun. So whenever the show was doing cool, interesting, creative stuff like that, I was really into it. It just whenever it was into the more generic adventure stuff, I wasn't super into it. But it had a great lead performance by Oscar Isaac, and I hope to see this character more, particularly in team-ups, which I hope we get. But despite my criticisms of this show, I still decently enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I hope it gets a second season, but for the most part, I hope we see Moon Knight more in the greater MCU. So I give Moon Knight Season 1 8 out of 10. I hope we see more. Upcoming videos. Tomorrow is my review of Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers with a special guest, and coming soon, a ranking of the X-Men movies, Top Gun Maverick, Stranger Things Season 4, and finally, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I hope you guys liked the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.